Well, welcome to Inside the Fishing Forecast. I'm Adam Martin, sport fish biologist with Kentucky Fish and Wildlife. Today, we're going to focus on bluegill and red ear. Since I'm the sport fish biologist in Western Kentucky, I'm going to talk to you about Kentucky Lake and Lake Barkley. Now, if you notice from the fishing forecast, these are both rated as excellent for red ear sunfish, and bluegill fishing is also very good. Now, what makes these lakes unique for red ear is actually the size of the lake. The growth rates are incredible. So it's not uncommon at all to catch 11, 12 inch, and I've definitely seen bigger red ear caught in both lakes. Now to target these fish, the best time of year is going to be pretty much the last week of April to the first week of May. But it's really tough to nail down because you're targeting these fish when they're spawning. You see, the males of these species will form shallow depressions along the lake's bottom where the females will lay their eggs and the males will guard them for usually about a week until they hatch. So for that time period, they're basically stuck on that nest and can't leave, and they're trying to defend it against predators and other fish. So they'll readily bite a lure if you happen to put it in their nest. So that's when you want to target them, during that time period. You really can't set it by a calendar. You really need to look at the temperature range. And usually that temperature window that you're looking for is a water temperature between 65 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you can find that out, that's the best way to plan your trip. But generally speaking, last week of April, first week of May is going to be the best. Now, to target these fish, you're going to want a lure that's going to be near the bottom. So what I usually do is I use a spin cast reel, and usually about 6-pound test. This is a little bit heavier what I've got tied on now. And the way you're going to want to rig it is very similar to a drop shot for bass. So you'll take basically a number 4 hook, just a small little bluegill red ear hook. You'll find them everywhere with different labels. You're going to want to tie it with a Palomar knot and leave yourself plenty of leader on here on the end, so the excess tag. And you could leave yourself 2 or 3 feet if you wanted to, because you can always trim it later. And you want to dress the knot. What I mean by that is like position the knot so that your hook is pointed out away from your main line there when there's tension. That way you get a lot of nice action on it. You don't have to worry as much. Now on the bottom, you can rig it with a drop shot weight. Now I like these, these pencil style. They tend to get snagged a little bit less. You can also just take split shot, just like this, and then crimp it onto the ends. You can add more weight that way because it's kind of modular. You can add 3 or 4 to add weight. And what you want to rig it with, you can use any type of live bait you want to use, really. You can use crickets, you can use red worms, you can use night crawlers. Either one of those are going to be great options. You can use grubs, mealworms, that sort of thing. They're all going to take it pretty readily. And whenever you're fishing it, obviously, with a weight like this, what you're looking for is kind of a tighter line. And you're going to want to use a high rod tip while you're reeling it back in. And you're attempting to get this actually right next to the fish in their nest. That's what your goal is. And a lot of times in clear water, you'll actually be able to see those nests. And you'll know it whenever you hook into one. The red ear, they fight like, they punch above their weight in terms of fishing. So they're definitely a lot of fun to target. And again, you can adjust the length of, this excess here to try and get it tighter on the bottom. You can go a little bit, I wouldn't go much longer than this though for red ear, because they're pretty much on the bottom. You can also, if desired, you can kind of fish a combination here where you'll also drop in a cork. And this is a little more classic presentation like this. That way you can get some action on it and you see what your lure is doing at the time. You don't have to rely as much on sensitivity. So those are your 2 options there, and of course you can adjust this height based on the depth of water that you're fishing. Now how to find these fish gets a little bit tricky, because essentially what you're doing is you're trying to find those bedding locations of those fish. And in Kentucky Lake and Lake Barkley, those are going to be in shallow, protected pockets. So you want protection from the wind, because that's what they're looking for. And for red ear, you definitely want some type of cover. That's usually in the form of shallow flooded vegetation, like mustard flowers that time of year. Could also be some flooded grasses and that sort of thing, or button bushes. But it could also be, just a laydown. fallen tree. Those are all going to be great places to concentrate those fish for spawning. Now, the red ear sunfish, the bluegill, and there's also the long ear sunfish, they're all going to kind of spawn in the same areas. So if you're in a spot and you're only catching bluegill, but you're trying to catch red ear, just stick around because they're probably in the same locations, but they're going to be slightly different. Red ear prefer strongly to be more associated with cover. So if you're in an area surrounded by bluegill beds, you're going to want to fish the spot that has the tree if you want to get red ear. Also, they're colonial spawners, so they're all going to spawn in a big group. So a set of bluegill beds may have 50 individual beds, and you could theoretically catch all 50 of those fish. Now for red ear, they're colonial spawners too, but it's more small, so you're only going to get a colony of 3 or 4 beds at most. So if you're sitting in an area and you've already caught 3 right out of it, probably best to go ahead and move on, because there likely aren't very many red ear left in that location. Now the same thing goes for long ear sunfish, which a lot of people just call sunfish. They're kind of the orange, very brightly colored, beautiful fish. They're in those same areas and generally spawning at the exact same time, but even if they're not spawning, they're there trying to eat the eggs of the other one. So if you're catching the long ear sunfish, those brightly colored ones, that usually means you're in a good spot as well. Now, like I said, the best time of year, April, May, you can continue to catch bluegill throughout the summer. Now, I highly encourage you to check out Lake Barkley for the biggest red ear. They're slightly bigger than they are in Kentucky, but either lake is pretty good. And one other thing to consider is we also have a trophy master angler award in the state of Kentucky, where if you catch 3 fish of 3 different species that are above a trophy size class, you get an award as a master angler in the state of Kentucky. Now, the red ear sunfish is one of the more attainable ones because it only needs to be 10 inches to be considered a trophy fish for that program. Now, that's not super common on most lakes, but on Lake Barkley and Kentucky Lake, a 10-inch red ear is very common. So it's a great location to check out. This kind of fishing is great for kids and new anglers because it's a lot of action. You catch a lot of fish. And if you're also interested, you can clean and fillet those fish and fill up the freezer in a very quick way. Now, I highly encourage you to check out other sections of this fishing forecast, and always remember that every fishing trip starts with fw.ky.gov.